Welcome to the latest briefing room, a weekly show where we cut through the noise, the mainstream media, and social media to get at what's really happening in policing and public safety. Today, we have on the show someone with a remarkable story, Chief Renee Hall. Chief Hall followed her father's footsteps and joined the Detroit Police Department. She rose through the ranks to become deputy chief there in that city, holding positions across the board from patrol officer to supervisor to precinct commander. She made history in 2017 as the first woman and first Black police chief of the Dallas Police Department. There, she managed a department of over 4,000 members with a $500 million budget during some of the city's most pressing and actually nation's most challenging moments coming out of COVID or during COVID and George Floyd. In Dallas, she launched bold reform initiatives and reduced crime. Chief Hall now serves as the president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. She was sworn in just a few days ago. This gives her a national and international platform to advocate and help advance public safety. Chief Hall, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Mike. I appreciate that.
Or should I say, Madam President, because you were just sworn in as the president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's truly a blessing and an honor.
We're going to come back to that, but I think you know how this works. This is a show where we dig into some of the headlines making news when it comes to public safety or policing. We try to go beyond what may be the mainstream narrative or we'll get clicks online. So we'll go through 3 stories that have appeared in the weekly briefing. And then as a prominent law enforcement leader, I'll just get your perspective on these stories. And then after we're through, you and I will have a conversation. Does that sound good?
Sounds wonderful.
All right, story number 1. Headline from the Financial Times, The Great Crime Paradox. So crime is down, but public fear is up. And we talked about crime being down over the course of several episodes here. So violent crime rates in the U.S. and the UK are near historic lows, yet public concern about crime is rising. Many people feel less safe despite the data showing otherwise. So low-level, visible crimes are shaping perceptions. Shoplifting, fare evasion, and other disorderly behaviors are on the rise, and these incidents are seen in everyday life and often committed by strangers, making them feel more threatening and immediate than rare and random acts of violence. People judge disorder and danger, as we know, as the article points out, and studies show public anxiety is driven more by visible disorder, many studies, than by actual violent crime trends. So a rise in antisocial behavior and fewer arrests or prosecutions reinforce, as the article points out, the sense that things are out of control when, again, the numbers, the data in terms of crime and violence, it's down pretty dramatically. So that's the paradox, as the article points out, and it's the headline of the article. America and the UK are statistically safer than they've been in a very long time, nearing historic lows in many cities, yet public spaces feel chaotic. It's not just media-driven perception. There's a real rise in everyday disorder, and that is feeding the public unease. So, Chief, how do you reconcile the data with this public unease that's out there?
So I think, Mike, we have to look at it from the community's perspective. There is perception of crime, and then there's actual crime. And the perception of crime being down is, when lawmakers and chiefs of police across the country start to talk about the numbers. We perceive crime to be down because we're 50% fewer homicides than we've been in the last 20, 30 years. But actual crime, when these things happen right in your neighborhood, when they come to your front door, when you're in a store and you're watching people snatch and grab, these things happen up close and personal. When we talk about the perception of overall violent crime being down, we have to remember that violent crime really doesn't plague everyday individuals. Violent crime is really geared toward individuals who have some sort of familial relationship, some sort of relationship, gangs, drugs, that preempt that violence. And so what we see from our communities is that they are not actually exposed to that level of violence. So that being up and down doesn't sway their perception. of what crime actually is. But when crime comes to your front door, when your house is broken into, when stores are robbed on the corner of your street, when mental illness comes to your neighborhood, individuals are breaking down and fighting. Those are the kinds of things that impact you personally, and they shape your perception about what crime actually is. And so that's where we have to understand that that is where that paradox is actually being driven from. And Mike, we have to deal with what is really true. Crime is usually down when poverty is lower. And when we look at what has happened in our country, there was an infrastructure bill that was put in place that has everybody working. When you drive, whether I'm in Phoenix, whether I'm in Detroit or here in DC, what we know is there's an orange cone all over the streets, and there are people working, and people are really driving, getting an income and generating revenue in these cities. And so we're seeing the effects of that in crime. But unfortunately, mental health, homelessness is not impacted by that level of revenue and or income. So the violent crime that's affected by the generation of revenue, employment, education, training doesn't resonate with individuals who are experiencing mental illness because they're not benefiting from these jobs and from these opportunities. And same with homelessness.
Yeah, I wanted a point you made just a few minutes ago. I think some people would be probably surprised. Now, you were a police officer in Detroit, and you worked your way up in the ranks. Variety of assignments in Detroit, but you worked the streets.
Yes.
You were a precinct commander. I mean, you were out there. It's not and obviously the police chief in Dallas. I think many people will be surprised at what you were alluding to earlier. Even in high crime neighborhoods that experience an elevated level of violent crime, like that's committed by a disproportionate share of individuals, a small number of individuals. And even if you live in a high crime area, you're not likely to experience the things that we think about in terms of shootings, robberies, and homicides that are still relatively rare events. And I'm not saying it doesn't affect the neighborhood, but I think there's a perception that if you live in a high crime area, you're experiencing those violent crimes which are really, and you are, in a variety of ways, but what you're really experiencing is that social and physical disorder that you describe, where there's homelessness on the streets, where there's the trash is on the streets, where there's smash and grabs and some of the low-level stuff like that you see and experience every day. You don't see a robbery every day, perhaps.
Exactly. That's what shapes the narrative about what crime is and creates that perception and that paradox.
There was an article which I covered in the weekly briefing as well on NYPD, which they were the first really in terms of doing quality of life enforcement based on broken windows back in the 90s. They are back at it, and they have a quality of life enforcement unit. It's now across all of Brooklyn, and they're seeing some amazing numbers. Just like to get your perspective on quality of life policing and whether there's units or just direction to officers to enforce minor crimes.
So, Mike, I think we have to go back to the basics, and the basics are if the people are the police and the police are the people. And what we've noticed from the beginning of Sir Robert Peel in community policing is that if you focus on the small things, you never have to deal with the larger things. And so I commend NYPD for focusing on those basic crimes, blight. We forget how an area that is experiencing demolished homes or deteriorated buildings, how that breeds crime. So if you address those issues in the beginning, you don't have to deal with the drug dealing and all of the crime that comes as a residual effect of that. So that has been a key in fighting crime from the beginning. When I was policing in the 90s in the city of Detroit, focusing on community engagement and focusing on those gateway crimes, as we commonly refer to them as, also helped to drive down crime in our area. So it's the basics, and going back to the basics is actually what we need to do. Now, we have to be careful what those basics are. Because we have a long history of policing. But when we talk about basics, we talk about dealing with those crimes or those issues that create crime. And that is definitely tied to the community engagements, and officers actually being there in a preventative measure more so than.
I think you hit the key to quality of life policing, broken windows policing. It is community engagement and understanding what the community perceives as the challenges and problems in their neighborhood, which will turn out to be those social and physical disorder types of crimes that police departments can work with communities together. And you also sort of echoed to what Commissioner Bill Bratton tweeted, or I don't know if it's called tweeted anymore, but it was on X when that article came out, said everything old is new again, saying that this is what we were doing in the 90s to drive down crime, and now police are back at it here in 2025. All right, let's hit the second article. Now, this is actually from a peer-reviewed journal, and I actually did not see it hit the media anywhere, but I pulled it out because I still find it fascinating, and it's something that should be more widely covered. So story number 2 is from the Journal of Social Science and Medicine, and it's got a long title because academics wrote it. Frequency, Recency, and Variety of Gun Violence Exposure, Implications for Mental Health and Suicide Among U.S. Adults. So exposure to gun violence is strongly linked to mental health risks. People who are frequently or recently exposed to gun violence, directly or indirectly, are significantly more likely to experience depression, suicidal thoughts, and seek mental health services. And it's not just direct trauma, but it's this indirect exposure that matters too. So knowing someone who has been shot, hearing frequent gunfire, or witnessing violence all contribute to elevated risk, highlighting the widespread psychological toll of gun violence in communities. And young men and Black Americans are disproportionately affected, according to this study. These groups are more likely to encounter gun violence, and as a result may carry a higher burden of untreated or unrecognized trauma and depression. So, and let me just make a point before get your perspective. I don't want to discount what residents in high crime neighborhoods do experience, as I was talking about going through the previous article, because if you do hear frequent gunfire, if you do hear about people who are shot, if you do see sort of the aftermath of that, this sort of gets at that article, like that does create trauma, and those neighborhoods do have a higher level of trauma than neighborhoods perhaps where you and I live. So I'd like to get your perspective on this article, Chief.
So I think this article hit a point in law enforcement that some chiefs like myself has been trying to drive home for so long, is that we see these cycles of violence. We see a consistency in mental health issues or challenges in communities with high crime. And it's because if I see it all day, if I'm exposed to this gun violence, this violence on a regular basis, how does that impact my everyday life? If I wake up and someone's dead and there's caution tape all over my block, how am I affected? How do I go to school? How do I engage at home? Is that my next door neighbor? Is that my uncle who lives in my home? Or in a lot of urban neighborhoods, there are families who live on blocks. Is it my cousin? And so there's this residual trauma that is felt as a result of hearing gunfire on a regular basis and experiencing violence. Why is it when individuals go to war and they experience this level of trauma and killing and violence, when they come back, we feel as if they're going to have post-traumatic stress disorder. They have been exposed to something that is abnormal. We accept that, but somehow in urban communities, in the Black community where this is prevalent each and every day, we seem to be astonished that individuals have trouble going to school, have trouble staying, paying attention, getting good grades, and we're challenged when we say, why do they have so many mental health concerns? This is a result of what they're experiencing every day, which is in some instances, Mike, equivalent to what people in the military experience once in a lifetime. And so if you're hearing gun violence, and couple that with a country that continues to say, let's give you more guns. We're not going to do anything about the gun violence. And on top of me hearing it and seeing it in my community, I turn on the television and there's another school shooting, number 265 for 2025. And so this becomes traumatic in so many different ways for individuals, whether they're in the urban community or not, but definitely when this is your everyday lived experience. And so I think there's this is a way for us to understand what our communities are going through. It's a way to introduce law enforcement to how we actually approach our communities. When we come in, sometimes in an enforcement capacity, what that looks like and what individuals are actually experiencing and how they receive us, whether that's extremely negative in some instances or, totally not wanting police presence. They don't understand because here's more violence. They're coming in because of more violence, whether that is they've been called or something's happening. This is what this neighborhood or this urban area or Black community is experiencing. And so our country has some work to do, Mike. We should be ashamed of ourselves for allowing people to live in these conditions on a regular basis, and they've gone unaddressed for a number of years.
Yeah, now let me be clear. This podcast is neither sponsored or we're not promoting ShotSpotter, but I know ShotSpotter well and their CEO. Like, I'm amazed, two things. Like in communities that have ShotSpotter, which is gunshot acoustic detection, so it can hear when a gunshot goes off, the number of gunshots they detect that are not reported to police. And they think, oh, well, many people may think, oh, if there's a gunshot, of course someone's going to call the police. But the numbers are just incredible in these communities that have a high level of gun violence, that hear these gunshots all day or all night long, that don't go reported to police. And it blows my mind that there are critics of that technology that are against it for privacy and other reasons, when it can only help uncover the problem and help police and others help deal with the problem that's happening in those neighborhoods.
They're numb to the gunshots. And if it doesn't directly affect them, I mean, it has become a part of their community, like music. So if you're coming in and you're focusing on this fictitious gunshot, because in the minds of individuals who deal with this every day, this is just a part of our community. You're coming in to surveil us because this is our norm. It's not fathomable to you or myself, because these are not the areas that we actually live in. I actually grew up in the city of Detroit, middle-class neighborhood that turned into something different as I got older. But it's not our everyday norm. But to people who experience this every day, the realities are different. And this is about having cultural competency as a police executive, as a police officer, is to understanding the communities that we serve. People respond in the areas that they know how. Their understanding and their level of adapting and coping are different because of their everyday lived experiences. And once we understand that, I believe that law enforcement and community will have a better relationship. And it's these articles, it's this podcast, Mike, and I thank you for that, for lifting these issues up, having professionals to talk about it, and getting that over to the community so that they can see that we're actually dealing with these issues and we're bringing them to light, so that policing and overall community engagement can only get better.
Thank you for that. And the study, by the way, calls for targeted public health interventions, which I liked. It's not all, as it happens a lot, put on the police. It should be a collaboration to provide care for these communities with mental health professionals and law enforcement, not just law enforcement. All right, final story, and this is I found it in the Oklahoma Voice. And it is a small study. I will preface that before I read the fact what was in the article. But still, it has sort of national implications. I'd like to get your perspective on. So from the Oklahoma Voice, the headline is "Stigma Still Keeps Police from Seeking Mental Health Care," study finds. So officers face extreme trauma, but many don't seek help. The average officer experiences around 180 traumatic events over a 30-year career. 180 traumatic events over a 30-year career, yet may still avoid mental health care due to the stigma and the fear of professional repercussions. So stigma remains a serious barrier, even as we've seen resources, according to the article, expand across the country, mental health resources for police officers and mental health resources in police departments, even as they've expanded. So despite access to counseling, peer support, and wellness coordinators, most officers said, according to the study, that their peers wouldn't disclose a mental health issue to a supervisor or colleague. Many worry about being seen as weak or harming their chances for a promotion. So it seems culture, not just access, is a problem. While departments are investing in mental health programs, as the article points out, the study shows that organizational culture and fear of judgment still keep officers from using these services even when available. So we just talked about the trauma inflicted in high crime neighborhoods from gun violence. Here's a study that comes along about the trauma that officers experience over their career and the effect that that has on their mental health. So I'm curious, especially as your role as the president of Noble, your thoughts about police and mental health, and again, the stigma that does seem to continue within the profession.
So, Mike, as a sitting chief, well, prior to becoming a sitting chief, when I was growing up in the Detroit Police Department, officers' mental health was a huge issue for me. Growing up in the city of Detroit and being a police officer in the city of Detroit, we're talking a 600,000 member city that experienced 900 homicides a year, 800 homicides a year, rape, robbery. And so we're talking about officers experiencing this each and every day. 900 homicides in a city that small, you're responding to multiple homicides in a day. And what does that do to your psyche? So it's always been a front of mind for me and even in my leadership. But one of the things I will say, although 21st century best practices tells us mental health has to be a focal point, the question is, we're rolling out various programs, but are we making it okay not to be okay? Are those words spoken? Because our officers have to be able to be comfortable with saying, I'm experiencing some trauma. And we know that the level of bravado, we look across this country, it is still 88% male in law enforcement. And so are we in the roll call rooms, in the locker room, even in the training academy, are we telling people that when you're on a scene and you've seen something traumatic and it doesn't set well with you and you're not feeling your best, are we training officers to go to someone and say, I know I'm in the middle of my shift, but I'm feeling some kind of way, and I need some assistance? Until we make that a cultural norm and make it okay, officers are never going to be able to go to someone and say that. We're in a technological age where there is cell phones and videos and cameras everywhere. So if someone is feeling like they've had a traumatic experience and it doesn't sit well, where's that going to end up? Who's going to know? Which ones of my peers are going to play this video over and over again? And I think it's incumbent upon law enforcement leaders today to get in and not just create programs, not to offer resources, but to create cultural norms around mental health trauma and law enforcement in order for officers to be able to really be able to gravitate and accept those resources. There's a lot of technology on the horizon today, where individuals are offering artificial intelligence to talk to officers regarding their mental health. And so I think we have to, one, continue to make that an option so they can maintain a level of anonymity, but also making sure that if there are some major concerns, that gets back to the law enforcement leaders to be able to take some sort of action, but continue to provide a level of service that will allow them to speak up. But until we culturally make that acceptable, and you know law enforcement, much like myself, it can be a tough space for you when you're at a weak moment. And so until we make it okay not to be okay, but not stay there, we're going to see the same results.
Well said. I don't think I could add much more to what you just said. I guess the positive news, and again, this is a small study, but I'm sure it translates across the country. We have seen an increase in mental health services, and we have seen an increase in agencies bringing in those services, whether it's peer support or counselors or others. But I guess that's the good news. The next step is, as you were pointing out, that make it okay to say you're not okay, and to reduce that, as the article pointed out, that stigma that still exists, so they don't fear that there's going to be some sort of, what their peers will think about them, or it would affect their promotion. All right, Chief, with the time we have left, just a few more questions,
Okay.
and I'll start with this. I don't know whether they call you Chief or Madam President, but for this one, I'm actually going to call you just Renee, because we were having dinner a year or two ago in Las Vegas, a couple of years ago. And it was with a number of other chiefs. I think the LAPD chief was there and a few others. And it's a great conversation around the dinner table. I love those dinners, like a salon, just different topics coming up. And you were the only female chief at that table and only female Black chief at that table. And you told a story about, which I'll just say the Black and Blue story. So you want to talk about or recount that story to us about being Black and Blue?
I can tell you, Mike, being Black and Blue is a real thing in the United States of America. And we saw it unfold in 2020. But let me go back. The history of this country, law enforcement, is Black Americans were not allowed in law enforcement. And it is the recent past. It is not hundreds of years ago that we were allowed. It is the recent past that Black Americans have been able to join the ranks. It is the reason that Noble exists. In 1976, a group of executives came together to ensure that there were going to be a continuation of individuals being able to join the ranks and also one day serve at the helm of these agencies. So this is not something that's new. And because of the history of law enforcement and the Black community, and how in the 50s and the 60s, there was an assault on Black Americans. Black men used to be shot in the back for running for sport. And so when you join the ranks of law enforcement as a Black American, you don't get the support of your family and you don't get the support of the Black community. But when you're in the ranks, you have a duty and a responsibility to make sure that you're protecting the constitutional rights of Black Americans in that space. So then you're sort of seen as public enemy number one inside of the organization. So the dichotomy is, where do I fit? Am I Black or am I blue? And I say that they are not mutually exclusive. And what I've said hundreds and hundreds of times is that Black and blue should be synonymous, because there should be no distinct color that law enforcement comes in. And when we join the ranks, our responsibility should be what everyone's responsibility is: constitutional policing, to ensure that we're administering services, giving of ourselves in the largest capacity with the highest level of integrity, and making sure that we maintain dignity in the authority that we have. And so that should not have a color. It's different as for Black Americans, but I'll go one step further and say it's even different for a Black woman. Because when I talk about 88% of law enforcement being men, that 12, 13%, sometimes that's women, that's just within the ranks. When you talk about being an executive in the ranks, it's a smaller percentage point. But when you talk about being a black woman executive, it's barely a percentage point. So getting in these ranks and being seen by your police officers as someone who is for the community and not for the troops, which is truly false. But I will say in that being a black American, being a black woman, I am responsible when I'm sitting in those seats to ensure that we never revert back to the kind of policing we had in the 50s and the 60s and beyond, that we maintain best practices. But I should not have to do that at the cost of losing the officers. And so it's a difficult thing to be black and to be blue and to be a woman, but I would not trade it for anything, the experience, and I encourage individuals coming behind me. Law enforcement is a wonderful profession. My father, most people who know me know that I followed in my father's footsteps. My father was killed in the line of duty. And so I believe in policing. I believe that it has to be a noble profession, because if not, then he died in vain. And so I just believe that regardless of your color, regardless of your race, the goal is to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. The goal is to have dignity and authority, serve at the highest level of integrity, but make sure we take those individuals off the streets who's caused harm and danger to the most of these. So that's my story.
And thank you for sharing that story about your father as well, which I knew he died in the line of duty, and you did follow in his footsteps to become an officer in Detroit PD. I remember, the one quote I remember about that is, you could never be black enough for some of the communities that you served, and you can never be blue enough for some of the officers. And that just struck with me, the balance that you had to sort of walk or try to walk about being a black female police chief who policed, neighborhoods that maybe needed you, that might be predominantly black, and you could just never be black or blue enough. That stuck with me many, many years since we've had that dinner.
So true.
Now, you were sworn in as president of Noble a few days ago. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
As president of Noble, and so and for those that don't know, I mean, that's the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Leaders. They have, I don't know, close to 50 chapters. I don't know the exact number.
60 chapters.
60, I was off.
Nationally and internationally, yes.
Internationally. So now you have a national platform, actually an international platform, to advocate for policing, for advancing the profession. Do you have, a plank? Are there priorities that as the incoming president you establish, and what will be those during the time that you are president?
Absolutely. Mental health for our officers, we maintain that as a initiative to ensure that we're taking care of those who are taking care of our communities. Advancing technology, artificial intelligence, ensuring that that our law enforcement officers have the knowledge and the expertise to be able to purchase for their agencies technology, but also that they engage their communities to be able to understand how that technology works and how it actually impacts their communities as a whole. Just policy around law enforcement as we continue to see some of the changes in this administration, in our country, ensuring that police officers' rights and our community's rights are balanced. We have to make sure that, one, our officers are safe, that they have a safe environment to police, but we also have to make sure that if, in fact, there is some violation of constitutional rights of our community, that those are also checked. So just maintaining those balances, ensuring that we are focusing on missing and murdered women and children of color. We do know that we see black women who go missing. They're treated differently than others in this country, and we want to make sure that at the forefront of that we are partnering with the NFL for child ID kits and to ensure that if something happens, law enforcement has the resources to go after these individuals. But overall, justice and for law enforcement, just continuously focusing on what law enforcement needs in order for us to be the best that we can possibly be in this country for our communities, and that we're not subjected to the polarizing or politicizing that has happened in the future. That, you know, Noble is a trusted voice in the community for all of law enforcement, and those are my priorities.
I was at your swearing in, and I'm excited for you, and I'm sure you're excited for the future, because I know you're optimistic for the profession. Whether there are challenges that you mentioned, and there are significant challenges in terms of different things that police have to deal with and have not been dealing with over the perhaps like missing black women. But I'm excited that you're at the helm of one of the most prestigious associations that can really advance these issues. Last question, and we may have touched upon it, but I ask everyone this who's been on the podcast. What do you think, is there one thing, or it could be two, but one thing that you think that we're just not paying enough attention? Now, you mentioned one, but that's on the horizon that more people really should be focused on, that we're not focused on right now?
I think, well, for me, it's technology. That is the key, because that is our future. Everything revolves around technology and artificial intelligence and how it impacts. And I just believe that we have to do more to educate individuals about what it is. There is so much fear about technology. We did talk, and you mentioned how individuals don't want certain technology in the community. But the reality, it's in your television. It's in your smartphone. It's in your laptop computer. It's, cameras all throughout whatever city you live in. And so we need to stop fighting it and focus on understanding it and making sure that we legislate around it to ensure that there are guardrails in how it's actually used. But that, for me, would be a priority and things that we really should be focusing on.
Well, Chief Hall, President Hall, I want to thank you for coming into the briefing room.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a blessed one.
Thanks for joining us in the briefing room. If you liked today's conversation, make sure you like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find every show, plus the latest public safety news, on our website, policebriefing.com. While you're there, sign up for the weekly briefing. That's my Substack that goes out to over 1,000 police leaders and public safety professionals. It covers top stories, trends, and research shaping policing today. It'll hit your inbox every Monday morning if you hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you here next week in the briefing room.